This is a conversation with Kojo Sarfo, a mental health clinician, author, and influencer whose content focuses on promoting mental health awareness. This podcast is sponsored by me. Please go to joshterryplays.com to see what I'm up to. Well, here we are. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. So, let's just start with the basic stuff. Let's just go with a little bit of backstory here. Like, what got you to working in the field that you're working in now?
So mental health. I tell a lot of people that I got into mental health on accident, and I say on purpose. You know, I took a job back in 2014, back in Augusta at a psychiatric hospital. I was working as a staff RN there, and I got to spend a lot of time with the patients and the other staff members, the charge nurses, and the doctors and the psychiatrists. And it got to the point where I became so fascinated with mental health. And, back in 2014, 2015, people didn't talk about mental health as much as, we talk about it now. But I was curious, so I kept, asking questions. And after, doing my research, I figured out about the DNP track, which is the doctorate of nursing practice track. And I looked into that. I went back to school to get my doctorate and specialize in mental health and psychiatry. And throughout the whole way, I've learned so much about not only mental health, but also about myself. So I just feel fortunate that, I somehow stumbled upon this career. That it was really just something that I started because, I was curious, and I ended up not, quitting and not leaving. And, before you know it, I turned it into a career. So I just want to thank, the people who never gave up on me, all the psychiatrists back at the old job who would answer my questions. And I encouraged me to go back to school because now, 7 years later, you see mental health has become this big thing that, affects all of us. So I feel very fortunate that I found my way into this career somehow.
Those people that are willing to, answer the questions of a confused person on a new subject who's just exploring, they're lifesavers, man. Like, I would not be in the position where I'm in, if it weren't for people like that.
Yeah. I'm grateful that, we have, obviously if this was a perfect world, we wouldn't need mental health specialists, right? Because we'd all be doing good, but it's not a perfect world and we all have issues. So it's good to know that, we can count on certain people to help us out with our mental health, because that's where everything starts at.
How long were you working in the medical field before you got to this? Like, what were you exploring at that time?
So initially what I wanted to do nurse anesthesia, help put people to sleep and, work in that field. And I saw that I really saw people made a lot of money in that field. I heard that they made $300,000-$400,000 grand a year. So that's what I wanted to do. So my dad recommended for me to go into nursing school. So I did that and I graduated at 20. So things happened kind of fast for me. So that's where I was headed. So I worked about a year in the ICU, and that was neat. It gave me a different perspective on things. I got to see a lot of miracles, a lot of death as well. And I was 20 years old, so this is making me grow up really fast. And, my dad recommended for me to switch to the psych hospital. I actually moved from Macon to Augusta, Georgia. I think he and my mom wanted me to come on home because that's where they were residing at the time, Augusta, Georgia. So my dad, once he gave me the idea, I switched into psych. So I was working in the ICU for about a year. So I have about a year's experience before I went into psych and mental health.
The medical industry as a whole is something that I find myself just interested by. Just going in and out of it is just an interesting thing. And one of the things I keep hearing about is just the workloads. You hear about so many insane level of workloads. Is that something that you experienced or you saw, of just the absurd level of work difficulty?
In terms of how hard the job is?
Or maybe not difficulty, maybe just hours, just like long hours?
Right. It's funny because, the the people that you go to for help, medically, when you see them, they tell you to take care of yourself. They tell you to do the simple things, eat a diet that's right for you, get 8 hours of sleep, to refrain from illicit substances, all these things. But, you come to find out that the people who are the professionals are the ones who are not taking care of themselves, not, sleeping 6 to 8 hours a night, working long 12-hour shifts, working on call, working 24 hours in a row, and it leads to this, it's almost like it's a hypocritical type of thing, like do as I say, like you have to, take care of yourself by doing this, but then the people who are telling you what to do are not taking care of themselves. So I think it's difficult because in a lot of careers, especially in healthcare, when these trainees are, working and learning and doing clinicals and rotations, we're up for hours and hours on end. And, that's the only way that we know to cram, and learn the information. But we're not really living by example. Like we're just avoiding what, we know to do because we know what to do. We just don't do it. So I think healthcare needs to be revamped from the people who are providing the care to the people on the back end who are receiving the care. I think we do some things in America right, but there's a lot of things that we have to address,
Yeah. I'm a fan of Peter Attia's podcast, and he's a doctor, and I think I remember like hearing him tell some stories about, him being a young doctor and being in his car and, doing that trick where you wake up like 2 feet farther into the intersection, and it's like, oh, this is a problem. If I've gotten to this point where it's like, you're dozing off at the intersection without realizing that you're doing it,
Yeah, I've done it before.
Oh, yeah? Yeah. And it's like the crazy facts about sleep that I've heard where it's like, there's ways you can fall asleep where you just have no idea that it's happening. It's terrifying.
It's terrifying is the correct word, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, another thing is, I don't know have you explored much about sleep? I've been amazed when I've heard like the small amount of research that's gone into it in comparison to, I guess you would say, what percentage of our day it is. It's such a small amount of study has gone into that subject.
Right. Yeah, and we're still doing studies and trying to pull more evidence as it pertains to sleep. But there's a couple things that we do know. We do know that you need sleep. We know that you can't go without it. At least not for too long. And especially in psychiatry, there's different conditions like if you're talking about somebody who's bipolar in a manic phase, sometimes these people are able to go days, maybe up to a week without proper sleep and still feel good. And then, on the back end, you see, they might have a psychotic episode within the context of that mania. And that's for somebody who has like bipolar, but even anybody without a mental health condition, if you go long enough without sleep, there is, a chance of psychosis. You can hallucinate, you can hear things, you can see things, your thoughts and your speech can become disorganized. So what we do know about sleep is that it's essential. And you can trick the body and you can go without it for a little bit, if you're trying to get certain things done. But if you don't take care of your body, if you don't shut it down, your body will pick when it wants to shut down. And that's what we want to avoid.
I had a period of health dilemmas, and during that time, I was on the flip side of things where I needed lots of sleep, and to the point that I could not function with less than 11 hours of sleep a night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If I didn't get like 11 hours of sleep a night, I was such a zombie. I basically like couldn't get anything done. I was really struggling with like chronic fatigue and depression and stuff like that at the time. But it's just amazing how like there was no fighting that. Like whatever the sleep requirements were, they felt almost kind of like law, right? Where it's like that it's one thing that's just like, it's a strange beast that has to be factored in to the health formula.
Yeah. It's like that sometimes with, like when you have trouble sleeping, we have insomnia, or you can have hypersomnia where you're sleeping, for long periods of time. And a lot of times I've seen people who they've been in bed for like, like you said, let's say 11 hours, but it feels like 6 hours for them. They feel like, okay, I need to get more sleep. Like I didn't get enough sleep. But then when you look at the time on your phone, you're like, okay, I've really been asleep for 11 hours. And sometimes like people tend to have something that we call leaden paralysis. So like your limbs just feel heavy, especially let's say if you're struggling with a form of depression, your limbs feel heavy, like you're trying to get out of bed, but it's taking like an act of Congress to like move your extremities. You feel like the only thing you have energy to do is to lay back down. So sleep is like that. Sometimes people feel like they need too much or too little, but we do know that like if you don't get the right amount, at least for long periods of times, there could be negative outcomes on the back end.
What was it like dealing with death in the ICU? Was that something that required a lot of adjustment? What was it like learning to cope with that?
It was difficult because, I graduated high school at 17. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So my dad said, go ahead and start off with nursing and see where you go from there. So I didn't even think I would graduate the program. It was more so, let me keep going until I fail. And I never failed. And before you know it, I'm sitting there, I'm 20 years old. I'm not even old enough to, purchase alcohol in the country, but I'm taking care of patients who are, on their deathbed. And I remember one Saturday morning I went into work. I was rounding with the attending physician, and we had to tell a patient that their loved one was dead. They were brain dead. So, back in Georgia, if you're brain dead, once your brain stem is gone, you have no drive to breathe. You're officially dead. So once 2 neurologists came and pronounced the individual dead, then that doctor had to go and, inform the family about what was next. And that whole process, it was just shocking to me because I'm a 20-year-old, I just graduated college, and normally if I wasn't working that day, I'd be playing NCAA on the PlayStation with the guys, just having a good time. But this particular day I went into work and somebody lost their life, and the whole process of telling somebody that their loved one is gone, and you're in the hallway and, family members are screaming and crying, and I remember looking at the individual who had, was deceased, and I just remember being in the room just looking there, and I'm like, wow, this is somebody who's passed away. It gives you a whole different perspective on life. I remember driving back home from that shift. Normally I'd be playing some music to, get me back home. I played no music. I was just in the mode where I was just contemplating life. So it really made me appreciate life that much more, knowing that anybody can pass away, people who are my age, when you're 20 and there's people who are 19, 18 coming in, motor vehicle accident, people who are passing away. It just puts a different perspective on life. It makes you appreciate every single thing, even being able to walk. I'd be walking around my kitchen, tell myself, oh, thank God I can walk. You start to take, nothing for granted, when you go through things like that.
Do you believe it had any effect on your actions, your choices? Do you feel that you've sort of chosen to do things differently as a result of that perspective in any way?
Yes, that was a life-changing experience for me, being 20 years old, because it made me realize that you don't have as much time as you think you have. I tell my brothers that all the time, not to be so, over consumed with the idea and the notion of death, oh, I'm going to die one day. Of course, we know, we're going to pass away one day, but it just helped me remind myself that you never have as much time as you think you have, whether that's on a project or whether that's in life or with all the things you want to do. You'll never do everything that you want to do. You can. I tell people all the time, you can do anything you want to do. You can't do everything. So it just made me be more intentional, with the things that I wanted to do, and I saw life differently, and even now doing social media full time, I always ask myself before I do something, do I want to do this? Is this something that I want to do? If I want to do it, regardless of if it's such a big risk or whatever the case may be, I make sure that's something that I intuitively want to do, not that I'm getting it from somebody else, because you never know how much time you have. So I want to make sure that the years I have on this earth, I'm intentional with it. I'm having fun. Helping people, making a difference. So it just kind of put a sense of urgency in me. And, that can be difficult to balance sometimes because you have to enjoy life. But I want to have that, pulling from opposite directions, knowing that, okay, I need to be intentional and, I don't have as much time as I think I have, but also I need to have fun as well. So that's the small little, micro battle that, I'm having to deal with.
Yeah. So you decided to go into mental health. What got you from ICU to TikTok to creating on social media? What got you to, what made that journey happen?
Right. So the ICU was a year. Then I worked in the psych hospital for 6-7 years. The back end of it, I was getting, my DNP, which, the first 2 years is the psych nurse practitioner part, and the last year you're working on your doctorate, and I was working on a project where I was talking about, the harms of substance use disorder and how to help people who struggle with that. So after that part was done, 2019, I had my doctorate. Then I go to Southern Virginia, Williamsburg, Virginia, and I'm working there doing forensic psychiatry, working a pretty intense job. I'm working with individuals who have committed crimes anywhere from like petty theft to murder, arson. When these individuals will come to us from the jail or the prison, and because of their mental state at the time of the offense, a lot of them were not guilty by reason of insanity. So it was my job to help them, diagnose them, put them on meds, and then prepare them for conditional release. Like a lot of them will go back into like a controlled environment, especially if they had if somebody was like a registered sex offender, they couldn't just like go into like any neighborhood. So we would stabilize them on meds and prepare them for conditional release in like a controlled environment. And that was very intense, and it was just a whole new world once again for me. And, I was doing that job while I was in the middle of the pandemic, and I had a lot of free time on the weekends. I was in a long distance relationship. My ex-girlfriend at the time, she would fly in from Georgia and I was in Virginia. So on the weekends that she wasn't there, I had nothing but time, so I was posting on TikTok because I was bored, and I was also trying to, promote a book that I had released earlier that year, which was September 2019. So I was just posting because I was bored. I nearly deleted the app because I didn't understand how the algorithm worked, and it was just a nuisance to get notifications from TikTok. And I was just bored, so I just continued to post. And then as the pandemic took hold, right, my relationship didn't work out. So now I have a lot more time to post in the app, and now I'm just posting and I'm connecting with people. And the things that I had to go to school for all those years to learn, I didn't know that people really needed to know those things during the pandemic. And this is stuff that I had to ask a million questions to the psychiatrist to learn this stuff. And, it's stuff that I thought was simple. People would tell me, oh, thank you so much for explaining this. I didn't know the difference between this and that. So I use TikTok as a way to educate people during the pandemic, but also something to help myself out. Being at one point, I couldn't see family for 4 or 5 months, and I'm stuck in Virginia. Williamsburg, Virginia, of all places, not able to connect with friends and family. And leaving a relationship, it was a lonely period of time for me. So getting to go on TikTok and post and connect with people, it changed my life. And then, TikTok invited me to a creator event last year in LA, February in LA. And then that really got my mind going wow, you could turn this into a career. And I've had nothing but support from the community online. And, the same way that I try to help them, they've helped me out. And things just got to the point where, I had enough followers to say, okay, I'm gonna take a chance, and I'm gonna move to LA and see if we can make this work. And I believe that you can always go back to the job in Virginia. They'll always need providers, but you can never, recreate a moment in time. And I felt with the community I had and what I was building on TikTok, I felt like it was a special moment in time to go ahead and take the leap. So I went ahead and I quit my job, and I moved to LA, and I'm doing this full time. And it is a scary thing, but it's extremely rewarding. So I'm just grateful. I'm thankful for the whole online community, TikTok and Instagram, for embracing me and allowing me to teach, but also learn so much from people as well.
I think what's been happening online is just amazing. It's been amazing since it started. The internet is just a mind-boggling thing. It's one of those things that seems almost like it shouldn't exist, but it's just incredible. The power of the network effects and everything is just astonishing. And I also had, so many shifts during the pandemic. And there's something, it seems to be something to, you said that it was a unique moment in time. And I've noticed that there seems to be this, you see it many times in history, is this idea that in times of chaos, somebody that's willing to push and be, let's call it, a point of strength, they tend to have outsized returns when this happens. The more chaotic something is, I think that maybe the more reward there is for being willing to, put a foot down and say, you know what, I'm gonna push in this direction. And it might be a very odd direction, but simply the fact that you chose it is of value to a community, a society, a nation, whatever. And so I don't know. I'm just agreeing with you that I think it's a fascinating moment in time that I don't think is over. I think that and I'm trying to make content about this as well. Is that, hey, like if you want to go do something, if you want to go do something different, if you just have something that's been in your mind for a long time that you think you should try, now is a good time.
There's no better time. Like, if there was ever a time to do that, it would be now.
Yes. Yeah, it's astonishing. Well, it seems like the perfect connection. What were the fears that you had to address to start your own business? I mean, this is not easy.
Right. It's, I mean, just the unknown. So like, if you talk about anxiety, like it's the fear of the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen. And of course we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but if you're, aware and cognizant of the fact that, okay, I really don't know what's going to happen. And if you allow yourself to be consumed with that notion of, I don't know what's going to happen, it can bring out some terrible anxiety. So just not knowing what is next. And of course, as humans, we don't have the playbook to life. We don't really know what we're doing. We're just doing and hoping that we're going in the right direction. But and I think my upbringing has to do a lot with it. We grew up, in Nashville before we moved to Georgia, in Section 8 housing. Grew up really poor, didn't have a lot of money, so we were always like, we always kind of geared towards stability. So when I finally, get this job in Virginia, is paying well, 6 figures, I feel like, okay, I'm where I was wanted to be. Like, you're finally stable. So to leave that. And to go into like a whole unknown is very terrifying. You ask yourself, what if I run out of money? What if randos stop coming? What if my 15 minutes runs out? What if you get canceled for something? What if, the wrong thing is said online about me? There's so many things that you think about. And the more I think about like what could go wrong, it paralyzes me in a sense. So I like to counter that with what could go right. Like, you could touch certain people. Like, you could really, take this content and, go to TV with it. You could, have a show. Like, you could really take things to the next level and do something that nobody's ever done before. So when I thought about the benefits and, the potential risks, it was a no-brainer for me to step out. And it's like an everyday process. Like, it never gets easier, but it's just as rewarding. Like, I tell people all the time, like, every day, like, I'm out here, like, I feel anxious in a sense. A lot of it's excitement from, okay, I don't know what email is going to come, or what opportunity will happen, or what video I'll post that'll really change somebody's life. So a lot of it is excitement, so it's more good than bad, but you have to allow yourself to just take in the whole moment and not get too wrapped up with what's going on, and just kind of do it. Because sometimes the more you think about something, the less likely you are to just do it. So it's been great. Like, I'll go out to places here in LA and people will come up to me and say, oh, I have X, Y, and Z. Your videos helped me out in the middle of the pandemic. I was at the grocery store and a lady, she walked up to me and told me that. So those kinds of things like keep me going. Like, one comment like that can like keep me pushing for like months, despite not knowing where like your next paycheck will come from, because now you're not working like and getting paid every 2 weeks. You're getting paid from brand deals and ads and revenue on the back end. So I'm grateful that I've had the chance to, even do this, because this is not typical at all. And, I feel like in order to pull off great things, you have to sacrifice and you have to be willing to fail. And I heard a Mike Tyson quote, which really helped me out in the middle of this transition. He said that if there's not a chance that I'm going to massively fail at doing something, I don't want to do it. And I think that's how you pull off great things.
I didn't know, how I was going to react to all of this, because how could we, And I also have had, people come up to me and talk to me, and it's immensely rewarding. It's incredibly, positive to know that somebody has been helped. It's I mean, there's few things better. And I know that some people, just personality wise or whatever, they if they're in the public eye, that can be a struggle. So I was very grateful that it was a positive experience on my end. It sounds like it has been for you as well, and I'm glad to hear that, because when it's good, it's so wonderful. It's so heartwarming to, to talk to somebody and have them say, hey, things are better. It's like, cool.
Right. It makes you feel like I wish I could like take that feeling and put it in a bottle and sell it. Like, it's just the most rewarding thing ever.
It's beautiful. So have you, in this process, I've found that I'm dealing with this, and I see it, and so many other people that I talk to, and you read about it. I mean, like, in this experience, a lot of times I'm feeling like my hair is kind of blown back by all of the new things from, like, talking to new people and just having a wider network. It's a lot to adapt to. But have you found that you've had to transition from this experience of saying yes to everything to having to learn how to, like, selectively say yes and say no to a lot more things? Have you had to navigate that?
Yeah, and I learned that back from when I was working in Virginia, just, being burnt out, because it got to the point where content creation it became a full-time thing. And I knew I had to quit, honestly, when I walked into work one day and I felt like work was in the way of social media. And that was a scary feeling, because, like, you're taking care of patients each and every day. I'm like, I have to be, if not my best, I have to be, operating at a pretty optimal level to take care of somebody's life, right? So if I'm going to work and work is actually in the way of social media, I'm like, okay, I need to start thinking about putting in my 2 weeks or my month's notice, because, like, work is in the way of social media. So from that point on, I started taking social media, like, I started treating it like a business, so you have to really ask yourself, you need two things to happen before you commit to something. You must really want to do it, and then you must ask yourself, like, is this going to be beneficial to me, the other person? Like, what's it worth to do this or not to do it? Because a lot of times when you get burnt out, you can attribute it to a lack of boundaries. You may have been saying yes to everything, and they could have been good things that you all want to do and things that would help you out, but you only have so many hours in a day, right? You really can't do everything. Like I said, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So I've had to say no a lot more to a lot of things that I really want to do, or maybe push it back, like, a couple of weeks and say, hey, I'll do this later, or, I would love to do this later, but I'm not sure if I can do it. And sometimes you might really be booked, and then an opportunity comes your way, and you're like, okay, I've been waiting to do that thing. I'm going to make time for that specific thing. So it really is, it depends on, how you're feeling, how much energy or time you have. But I have been saying no a lot more, because, you have to, like, I'm not used to this. Like, I'm just somebody who, I use the internet to try and make to make a difference, not try. I want to be intentional with that, to make a positive difference, to help people out. And the platform is getting, like, much bigger, so when you have over 1 million people following and sending DMs and questions and all kinds of, requests, there's so much stimuli that's coming at you, so like, your emails are filled, your DMs are filled. So you really can't realistically take care of everything. So, but people do know that. And I think a lot of people are aware that, okay, once your platform is getting bigger, it's going to be harder to, reach this person. So yeah, you have to, enforce boundaries, or you just, your mental health, might suffer. So no is something that is in my vocabulary now, because I just have, it's self-preservation,
I also grew up fairly low income, and going through that process where you get to the point where you realize, oh, I need to say no to this thing, and it could make money. That was terrifying.
It's scary.
It really was. And by the time I got to that point, I'd already even worked through things so that, my finances were in order, and, like, I was handling it, right? Life-wise, I was adulting. But even so, the emotional, like, tie to, the fear of, not having enough money, the things that come with a scarcity mindset. learning to like see the logic in it and go, logically, I should not take this opportunity. And then to go through with that, it's a tremendously uncomfortable thing that, as you said, is a absolutely necessary aspect of self-preservation. It's like you can't operate without it. It's definitely a boundary issue, like you said. Boundaries in general, I'm fascinated by. I think they're so important, and I mean, most of my, I guess, steps forward in life have usually come from like me setting a boundary the day before. I finally set a boundary on something, and then the thing started to progress forwards. And I think it's a fundamental aspect of success is we have to draw a line in the sand. Not only that we won't go past, but that we won't allow others to go past. I think it's an act of strength that is almost like a test of nature. That it's a requirement to be the type of person who can move forwards, I think.
And people don't teach you that, necessarily. Like people tell you to, be kind, be selfless, help people out, bring good to the world, which are all good things. But nobody teaches you really how to take care of yourself and how to enforce boundaries, which are like the prerequisites to helping out other people, right?
Yes. Yeah. I like to talk about these concepts of like kind of, tapping into your dark side a little bit to have enough strength to set those boundaries. Is that something you ever explore much yourself? Do you find that subject of interest?
Tapping into your dark side in terms of like approaching the things about yourself that are uncomfortable?
Yeah, like I found that the ability to set boundaries is usually found within those more strong parts of yourself that you find uncomfortable. I'm just curious, do you think about that much? Do you find that an interesting topic?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by, like tapping into all parts of yourself, and especially the parts of yourself that, it's uncomfortable to get to. Like when you break down, like, let's say you're having a hard time enforcing boundaries, you get to the root of it, like they teach us in school, like if somebody's anxious, you don't just get them anxiety medication. Like what's the root? Like there's something going on that's causing that anxiety. If you get to the root of it, you could solve the problem, in a better way. So if, somebody's struggling with boundaries, like what parts of themselves are they avoiding? Like, whose opinion of you matters more than your opinion of yourself? Like is it somebody in your inner circle? It's not only the people that you care about who, like, if you disappoint them, like that's going to absolutely wreck you. And certain times, like you have to ask yourself, questions that are hard, like, hey, I have a hard time enforcing boundaries because I'm insecure. I don't feel confident in my abilities. Like you said, I have the scarcity mindset. I have this type of all or nothing thinking that if I don't take this deal, then, I won't get other deals. Or, you have to challenge all those negative thoughts. And sometimes, like, if you believe a certain thing to be true about yourself, and it's an insecurity, right? And somebody mentions it, and where they poke fun, at that thing, you're gonna really feel it because you're like, oh wow, I really believe this thing to be true about myself. But if somebody says something that's a lie and you don't believe that about yourself, you don't necessarily care. You're like, okay, whatever, they're just talking. Like anybody can, talk or, assume things about a person. But if you're struggling with a certain part of yourself, right, and that's something that is a daily struggle for you, and somebody says, oh, you're not doing this because of X, Y, and Z, and it's true, it's going to really, really make you feel uncomfortable because it's like eating away something that you believe to be true. So I think it's important to, like, like I'm a positive person. Like I like to be online and smile and things like that. But sometimes you have to approach the darker parts of yourself, or you have to approach uncomfortable, sides of, of living and say, okay, we need to talk about this. Like, for example, I didn't grow up with money. So before I even moved to California, like I had to save like a certain amount of money because like I'm, overly concerned about, asking for help, because we grew up on food stamps. So we were always asking other families for help and things like that. So as a child, I'm like, okay, well, It may have been traumatic for me as a child. So like, this is a part of myself that, okay, I need to address. I need to make sure that I'm good within, that I know that I'm going to be fine and accounted for as I go on this new journey. So if I approach, this whole new social media, world, and I know, okay, I have a money insecurity because of how I grew up. If funds get low, I'm not myself. So I prepare, I put the funds aside, but at the same time, I do the work myself and realize, okay, it's not all about money. Or you can do other things. You can budget appropriately. You can, make sure you have different sources of, revenue coming in. You can save your money. So there's things that you can do to be practical, but also work at the inner parts of yourself, which if you don't address that, you could struggle moving forward. So I think it's important to get to, the root of some of these issues and allow yourself to be human. Sometimes, especially the ones of us who are big content creators, like people look up to us. So it's hard to like be human. People expect you to come in, like if I'm not smiling or dancing, or if you're not giving your really good tips on TikTok, people are like, oh, well, we know Josh for this. We like this. We like the tips. But like Josh is also a human who has to be himself in order to bring these tips, So that's that, struggle between being a creator and also being a human as well. So it starts with yourself. And like we're not, everything isn't like all roses. Like you have different parts of yourself that you don't want to address, but there's nothing wrong with taking it one thing at a time and addressing those parts of yourselves.
I find myself encouraging more and more of my clients and just friends and people around me to be more boldly flawed. It's an exercise in, it's not, I mean, it is acceptance. And it's not wearing your flaws as a badge of pride in the sense of like, that can go too far as well. Like, oh, I'm just an impatient person. That's who I am, and that can, of course, turn into a mess of a rabbit hole. But learn how to have a sort of almost a brash, carefree element in your perspective on what your flaws are, where it's, oh yeah, I'm an impatient person and that's kind of hilarious and that's what I do and I'm going to try to mitigate it and, deal with it when I notice it. But also, well, isn't that ridiculous how I just, was just wildly impatient in that moment? And I think there's a power in that because, and this goes to, I think some of like Brene Brown's shame research, but, I think a big part of the things that we are ashamed of, we think that, they should not be. And if it is discovered about us, then, we will be banished from the tribe and starved to death, right? It's the ultimate wrong. And once it's exposed, it's over, right? You're over. But the reality is in a lot of cases that when you expose it, the shame sensation is over. The fear around it tends to dissipate. I think that she said something along the lines of shame in the open evaporates or something along those lines. Like when you speak about it, it loses its power. I feel like a lot of these flaws, faults, hang-ups that we have, putting a little bit of boldness behind them pushes them out into the open and allows that openness and communication to happen in order for it to dissipate.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I tell people sometimes, I'm like, the thing that you're concerned about, the thing that you're overly concerned about and insecure about, what if that was the thing that changed your life? Like, what if that insecurity became a strength? Like if kind of like, I think it's an Eminem movie where, the last rap battle, he put out all of his, flaws and then the other guy had nothing to say. That's a great example. And like, even like my book, You Already Won on Amazon, I think the reason why that book did so well is because of chapter 9. There's 10 chapters in the book, and in chapter 9, I talked about, my own struggles with ADHD and growing up and, not being diagnosed at a young age, but feeling like I had it and just kind of struggling through school and just kind of finding my way and not really getting diagnosed until I was like, I think 25 or 24. And back then, I mean, now on TikTok, everybody's talking about ADHD and just so many videos, so there's so much more awareness now. But just 2 years ago in 2019, I didn't see anybody talking about it. So like I wrote the book, I had it ready. I was ready to get it formatted, the manuscript. I was just about to send it to the editor first. And, I was talking to a couple of close friends of mine about, chapter 9. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to put out that I had, ADHD in the book, and then I asked myself, you said, talking about the uncomfortable parts of yourself, the dark parts, and why you feel a certain way about certain things. I asked myself, why don't I want to put this in the book? There's other people who have ADHD. But then I got to the core of the issue, and the core of the issue was I knew I would be successful one day and do well. I didn't know it'd be like this with the TikTok thing, but I knew that I was going to be successful one day. And I didn't want people to say, oh, he only got his doctorate or he only became successful because he was taking stimulants in college for ADHD. That was my big fear. That was like my one thing. Like if I'm on stage, I can't think of anything that somebody would say that would embarrass me. But if somebody were to say, oh, he took, stimulants and Adderall while he was in grad school for ADHD, that's how he pulled off all of this. When I thought about somebody telling me that kind of cut deep in me. I'm like, oh, snap, I'm hurt by this hypothetical situation. It's never happened, but I've created it in my mind. And then once I made peace with that situation, like, okay, I imagine, it's kind of like, self-exposure therapy. I imagine, okay, if somebody were to say that to me, how would that make me feel? And now I realize that I'm like, that's not an indicator of my success. Like if you have a condition, you take a medication for it. The same thing I tell my patients, like you take a medication for a certain thing, you're not ashamed of it. And you can give somebody like all the stimulants in the world and they can't pull off the specific thing that I've done. They can't pull off the specific thing that you've done because we all have talents. And, I'm talented like this and you have your own set of talents. So once I divorced myself from the idea that, oh, people will think that I'm this because of that, then I was able to leave that part in the book. We got it edited, we got it formatted, we got it published. And I feel like that part is the main thing that made the book so good, like being open and transparent and vulnerable. And now that I'm on the other side, like putting down the book allowed me to be my most authentic self on social media. There's nothing that anybody can say that will scare me. Like that was my one big fear. So like you say something about me or I did this in the past, I'm like, okay, that whatever, you can say whatever you want to say. But that was the one thing that I was afraid of, but now that I put that out there, like now I post with confidence, I post to help other people, come out from the shadows. And, if people knew, because it's so hard to like get over the hump, right? Because before you're over it, you're thinking about what people will say and your close friends, and it's so scary. But once you get over that fear or you put that thing out and you realize that there's nothing somebody can say to put you down, it's the most liberating feeling of all time. Like you just feel free, like there's a weight lifted off your shoulders. So I completely agree, to be brash, to be open, and that's a human experience. Nobody can be perfect, and this quest for perfection is just making all of us anxious. It's not doing anything for us. We're faking it, I'm faking it. No, just be yourself. You'll help out so many more people, and you'll also help out yourself.
I love what you said about these quirks and different aspects of us, and how sometimes there's strengths that manifest outside of this. And I always feel the need to like disclaim ahead of time, and I don't know that it's necessary, but I'm of course not trying to say that there aren't people that have very legitimate issues that there's no question that something as horrible has happened. That definitely happens. But also, there are so many situations where we have something about us that is very troublesome in some way. And out of it comes so much strength that it's astonishing. Or, a talent, or even just a quirk of good luck that only could have happened in your direction because of that thing. And I mean, like, I'm wildly neurotic, and it was just incredibly problematic in my artistic creation for years, where I overeducated myself on subjects in a way that made me, not spend the time just playing and exploring and making things. And usually a lot of the best art that you can create comes out of those moments of play and exploration. And I didn't allow myself that. I would worry ideas and creative projects like a dog worries a bone. I would just go round and round and round. But in the midst of all that, I was constantly thinking about ideas. I was constantly thinking about, philosophical concepts and concepts of personality and how the world worked and how life worked. And here I am writing about those things. And it works and it helps. And it's good for me, and others are saying that it's good for them. It's incredible how that process can manifest where, there's something that you really struggle with in your mind or your body, and not always, but you can get incredible dividends out of it once it's turned the right way. Right.
The sad thing is that you almost have to take the leap and go out there and do what either, you or I have done. Like, you have to almost do it to understand what we're talking about, because unless you do it, like, you just don't understand. You so doubt yourself. You're like, how can something that I'm passionate, how can I provide value to the world? Like, it doesn't make sense. It's not a logical thing. There's a lot of things in life that aren't logical that we just kind of roll with, right? Like the idea of love, you live on this earth for 30 years and you meet somebody for a year and a half. You know them for a year and a half, and then you combine your finances with them and you put like all your trust in this other person and you raise a family with them. That's not necessarily logical, but we do it, so like to put out parts of yourself that could be, uncomfortable, or to show your gift to the world and expect millions of people to like appreciate it. That's not the most logical thing, but it's not until it happens. And then you're like, okay, wow, I didn't know that I had something that was this valuable to the masses,
I want to shift into around mental health sort of question. And I'd like to open it with, what are your thoughts on labeling? And what I'm asking there is, do you notice a difference when somebody has a label for something versus when they don't? Like, we know that, as a child grows up, they go through a process of, putting things in boxes and starting to say, okay, that is a tree, that is a chair, that is this, that is that. Is there an importance of labeling inside of mental health?
As it pertains to like a diagnosis, or?
Yeah, I think that's where I'm getting to, like concepts of diagnosis, where it's like, is it important to have a name for something? Does it matter? And if so, how does it matter?
That's a fantastic question. In my opinion, I do think it matters. At the same time, I understand people who may not want to seek a formal diagnosis for a certain thing. Their reasons are very valid. If they found ways to, let's say they have a certain condition or personality trait or disorder, they may not want to go, put a label on it because they have found ways to accommodate with wherever they're struggling with. So in their mind, they're able to make it from, Monday to Tuesday, back around to the next week and do okay. In my opinion, the reason why I think I would say, I would respectfully say that it's good to have a label, because you can, like, once you have a label of something, like let's say, you struggle with ADHD, anxiety, depression, whatever the case may be. Once you have that label of formal diagnosis, at that point, you're allowed to absolve yourself of, the things that condition makes you do. Like if you're unfocused and you miss out on a lot of things because you have ADHD, or if you've accidentally ghosted your friends for a week or two because you were having a depressive episode, you can absolve yourself of, the blame of, oh, it's not you being a bad person. I'm not a bad friend. I'm not a shitty friend. I was going through my thing, and, I got the help that I needed, and now I'm back on my feet, and I think that's a self-esteem booster, because if you don't know what's going on, and, sometimes, we'll use euphemisms and say, oh, my nerves are bad. I'm kind of going through it, because that's how we understand things to be. But if you can put a label on it and say, okay, this is what I was going through. And, as we talk more about mental health awareness and people realize that everybody struggles with their own thing. Then the other person is, more likely to be empathetic and say, oh, wow, I did not know you were going through this. Let me learn about this. And that way I know how to help you, instead of, blaming that person, saying, oh, this person's a bad friend. They canceled on me. We had plans and it was supposed to be the best weekend ever. I didn't hear from them. You might go to their apartment and the whole place might be a mess. They may not have showered for a couple of days. So if you understand, okay, wow, like this person is going through this. I didn't know that this is what was going on. Not only can you be empathetic towards them, but you can help them out. And, in life, we all depend on each other. So they might help you out. And then the next time, whatever they struggle with, you're like, okay, I got you. I can help you out. And like the older I get, I realize that things aren't equal in life. Like sometimes we want this to equate to that. Like things aren't equal. You can't really treat things the same way. Like I'm more for, approaching things from like an equitable perspective. Like if you have kids, 2 kids, and one of them is doing really well and one of them is depressed, or one of them is, having a Mac episode, or whatever the case may be, the person who's going through it would probably need more of your time and attention. Doesn't mean that you like the other kid less, but this child needs more attention at this time. So when we know what's going on and we know that, okay, this is a mental health condition that the person has, then you can understand that, okay, it's not a character flaw. They just struggle with X, Y, and Z. And I think when people have that label, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but I think once people know that this is what's ailing them, you can start to work towards the solution. It's hard to, I think Mac Miller had it in one of his songs. He said, pain's a funny thing when you can't figure out the source. And I think a lot of people feel that way, like you're struggling and you're hurt, but you don't know where it's coming from. And that's like adding on to the frustration. You don't know why you're hurting and you're in pain, but you know that you're in pain. So I think if you can get to the source of, what's, ailing you, and sometimes it might be hard. If you're depressed, you might not have a specific reason to be depressed, and that's fine. But once we know what's going on, I feel like we can get to the solution a lot, quicker.
To give a ridiculous analogy, because I like those, would you say it's something along the lines of, if you decide to run a foot race and you lose, it's better to know that you had a broken leg than to just be inexplicably be sad about losing the foot race.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, if Usain Bolt has a broken leg and he's racing me, I'll beat him. It's not going to make sense. Like, did Usain Bolt fall off? I mean, how did he lose to somebody who has no Olympic training? He had a broken leg, so it makes things make sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, I think that specificity is a tremendous tool to make the world a better place, and just across the board, pretty much. For me personally, for example, I had chronic fatigue and depression. The symptoms, of those two mimic each other, right? So chronic fatigue has a lot of the physical symptoms of depression. And, depression creates a lot of physical symptoms that are like chronic fatigue. It took me a long time, but part of my process of moving out of those states was to see the difference between the two. Because for a long time, I would have days where I would wake up fatigued, and then I would get depressed. I wasn't depressed. I was fine. But I would get depressed because I would think, oh no, I'm depressed.
Right. It's like a 1-2. They play off each other.
Yeah. I just, I would feel the body sensations, and I would translate that into something else. And I would manifest a new dilemma for myself. Or other times, I would feel sad and I would be perfectly healthy that day, but then these feelings of sadness would come on, and here comes, leaden arms and leaden legs, that I couldn't move. And learning to differentiate between those two things was an extremely valuable process because it enabled me to, hone in on what I actually wanted to work on, what I needed to work on that day. Because, I mean, even just those two, it's really something, like chronic fatigue and depression at the same time. That's a hard to kick thing no matter what. Just depression compared to chronic fatigue and depression, like if you're used to both and you just get one and you know it, right, you can be like, all right, I can go for a walk. I'm sad, but I could go for a walk, or the flip, you can pick a tool that works, and that only comes as utterly simple as it sounds from just seeing it, I think. And I feel that those labels do help you see it. This isn't an argument against what you said, by the way, but I don't think it absolves you of the responsibilities to do the things you need to do in life. But I think that without seeing clearly what your state is and what condition you're in, it's absolutely pointless to look at those responsibilities. Maybe not pointless, but it's one of those futile exercises, right? Where it's just like,
doesn't serve you any good.
Yeah. Looking at the responsibilities outside of the context of the human that you are. I mean, let's go to another ridiculous analogy. If you're too short to dunk a basketball and, like your responsibility is to dunk a basketball. Well, first of all, you need to get a new responsibility, and then, other situations to, make it a little bit more moderated, it's like maybe on a really, really good day, you can dunk a basketball and you can't identify what a good day is for you. Well, if that's the case, then you should be dunking basketballs on your good days. I don't know why I went to a sports analogy. I know nothing about sports, but it
makes sense.
Work.
I get it. So
yeah, that's my thought on it. I believe that the labels are very important.
Yeah, and when I said absolve, I think more so of, I think a lot of people, because I think self-esteem is very important. I tell people to be mindful of at all times. Like, when you hang out with a new group of friends or a person that you like or whatever, how do you feel after you walk away from that interaction? Like, these are small things you have to pay attention to because it's important to work on your self-esteem. You never know when the rainy day will come and you're feeling down on yourself and your self-esteem is going to hold you up. So more so of not really absolving of the responsibilities, but allowing you to realize that, okay, this is the thing that's going on. So because of this, that's why I'm doing this. Kind of to give an explanation so that way they know that, oh, I'm not some bad or lazy or unmotivated person, and you don't like pin it on yourself. And you still feel good about yourself, but you can attribute what is going on to the fact that you have this condition.
Yeah, I went into this because it is a confusing thing. This idea of like, okay, I have something that I'm struggling with that's stopping me from the things that I want to or should do. And it's not like you can stop doing everything. But also it's not like you should, feel barrels of shame coming down on you because you have a legitimate thing that is making you not able to, act on what you want to do. And it's this weird back and forth dilemma, I think. And another aspect of this is, I believe that when people have an understanding of how difficult something is, they are usually more capable of dealing with it. In the sense that there's a famous story about somebody who wanted to go to the North Pole. I think it was the first person that was going to go to the North Pole. And he posted in the London Times or whatever the big news magazine of the day was, needs something, I'm going to butcher it, but needs strong, brave souls for perilous journey. Hunger, danger, cold, and misery awaits. It's likely you will not return, but much glory awaits if you do. Essentially, that was the message. And he had more applicants than he could possibly handle. Everybody was like, yeah, sign me up. I'm in. I'm not sure that there was even, like, pay. I'm not sure about that. but it was like basically he painted the worst scenario, and he said, "You want to try?" And the human spirit was like, "Yeah, let's do that." And I feel that there is something similar inside of mental health issues, where if we can see, oh, okay, I'm dealing with this, it gives us an ability to think about it and make some decisions where we can, we can either go, oh, I see, because of the thing that I'm struggling with, this is really hard for me and I'm going to do it anyways. Or you can, flip it and be like, that is one that is not worth the effort. We're going to change what we're going to do. But I feel like having the label gives you that power.
Yeah, I like that. That analogy is spot on. And I think in terms of knowing how difficult something is and being able to, handle it, I think, like, if you know that, for example, like, here's another analogy. I don't know if it's going to be on the mark, but if I have like two weighted balls, one is 5 pounds and one is 50 pounds, I'm gonna, when I pick up the one that's 5 pounds, I just pick it up, right, with one hand. But the one that's 50 pounds, I'm gonna be in a proper position. I'm gonna, bend my knees, make sure to not use my back, but I'm gonna approach it with with respect, because all right, this thing weighs so much more. So I'm gonna go into it. I'm giving my best energy. So like, if you know how hard something is, like, you approach it and you enable yourself to have the energy to go ahead and to deal with it, because okay, this is, yes, it's that hard, but I am capable to, to deal with this thing head on. So you bring out the best. It's kind of like when, a bad team plays a good team and then it's a close game, like, you play to their level, you bring out the best in you.
Yes. I wanted to ask you, I coach. That's a large part of what I've been doing lately. And the type of stuff that I'm doing, a lot of times it ends up being similar to, I guess you would call it behavioral therapy, all right? So nobody, slap me with any lawsuits or anything.
Yeah, I know how it works.
Like, it's not behavioral therapy, but there's similarities, right? In the sense that we're trying to take on actions that result in shifts for us, and it's just been really interesting to watch how there are so many commonalities in the struggles. Now, they're all unique, obviously. They're all, extremely unique. And that's, I guess, part of the labeling conversation. It's like, it's important to see that. But also, I've noticed that there are so many, like, universal struggles and so many, like, universal dilemmas that we run into, some of which we stop working on by using the excuse that it's a special problem that the kid, it's not totally unsolvable, but you mentioned earlier that you worked with some fairly intense patients in your previous work. I can't remember what you called it.
In the forensic environment, work with patients who have had legal charges, sometimes murder, child molestation, like some pretty troubling stuff.
Right. So I was curious if you had noticed a lot of commonalities by any chance in this sort of more extreme situation between those folks and other people that you've worked with. Have you noticed that there's some fairly universal things even in the extremes?
Between, like, the former people that I used to serve versus who's the other side of people?
Are you working with clients currently, or are you purely in sort of the social media production at this point?
Oh, so I'm mainly in the social media space, but I just finished like a 3-month telesite contract at a jail. I was working at a jail for 3 months. A friend of mine who's a psychiatrist went out on maternity leave, so for 3 months. So they had nobody to fill it up. So I was here in LA, and I would turn on this camera, and then I would just wake up at 5 a.m. and see patients because it was 8 o'clock over there. So I was doing that up until 2 weeks ago, and now I'm back on social media again. And then I'm sure I'll take on clients.
Here, let me rephrase the question. So you're interacting with a ton of people online, and so I'm curious if you see commonalities between the folks that you know are dealing with that are in these really intense situations, and people that might be, let's call them, categorized as more normal folks? Are you seeing commonalities there?
Oh, yeah, you see a lot, and even between the tense population I served and myself, like with my personal issues, like a lot of times, like people don't just, get to a situation where they, take somebody's life or rob a bank or something like that. A lot of times there were like, warning signs. Like if you can, the more preemptive you are, the better your outcomes. So like for myself, like, or the people that I deal with, like you have certain things that you struggle with or certain things that you might not like. You might get upset or frustrated, but normally you would catch yourself and say, okay, all right, I'm upset now, but I'm going to take a break, or like, just doing like standard CBT for like somebody like the working well, right? Somebody who was like working, but they're anxious, right? You're talking them through the different steps, like, okay, well, this is what you fear. This is how we're going to approach it. How can we think differently about this situation? And a lot of times, like back in the old environment, the forensic environment, a lot of times when I talk to these individuals, a lot of them who had some serious mental health conditions, like, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, and things like that, even in the midst of their, hallucinations or delusions, even before they did what they did, like a lot of them told me that they had a point where they sat down and they understood what they were about to do, but whether it was like a lack of impulse control or whatever the case may be, they still did it. But a lot of times, they understood the seriousness of what they were about to do as they did it. So like we do have a conscience, and like we are aware of certain things. Because of some people's mental health conditions, they might not be able to stop themselves and they might impulsively carry out these maladaptive actions. But it means that you're capable. Of course, like once you're in the right meds and once you're stable, I believe every individual is capable of knowing what they should do and what they shouldn't do. So, and I think that's helpful, and I'm not blaming, the former population that I work with and saying that, oh, they were bad people and they still went ahead and did what they did. Obviously, they had a mental health condition, which they weren't in, their optimal state of mind to know what they were doing. But once they're stable and once they're on their meds and they have the proper treatment, you can empower them to say, hey, now you're doing better. So let's do this. Let's put yourself in a position to, go out and get a job, have a family, and all these different things. Because a lot of times with mental illnesses, people think that, because they did X, Y, and Z, they must be a bad person. They can't there's no hope for them. They can't live a productive life. You can live a productive life. And I think it's important not to baby our patients. The best thing you can do for them is empower them, to let them know, hey, yes, you do have responsibilities. You do have to abide by these rules and regulations, and you can do it too. It's not an excuse. Yes, you need to be stable. You need to have your proper regimen of meds and therapy and things like that. But everybody has like the ability to do right and to have a productive life. So whether, somebody has committed the most egregious offense, or whether somebody who's just, anxious and they come in to see you, or, through like a telepsych appointment, or if it's just standard therapy, I do realize, and I do believe that everybody has the ability to do better for themselves, so I don't want people to think, oh, I have this condition, it's over for me, or the word I can't. Yes, you can. We all can. Like, we have to realize that every single person can. You can. That person might need more. They might need 3 or 4 meds. They might need to go to therapy twice a week, and you might not, but we all can. I think it's important to realize that you can, because once, even some of the patients who I would consider to be among like some of the more severe cases I've seen, once they have the right treatment, whatever that consists of, they still can. Now, will they be able to run for president or be a successful entrepreneur? Maybe not, but they can all do something, to their ability, which will give them value. So I think it's important to realize that whether you're dealing with like a relatively small issue or a big issue, we all can. Because it's empowering when you tell somebody you can do this. They feel like, okay, like if people can't do anything, you're stripping them away of their dignity. They're not being a human being at that point. If people have to make decisions for you, so everybody can. I think that's the common denominator I've seen between, the two sides.
What are your thoughts on the balance, or let's call it maybe interplay, between medication and therapy, or, going through the mental health practices that, are required to, move forwards. Some people are, biased towards just solve it with a medication and we're over. And others are biased towards medication is evil and we need to, never do that. If you've do that, that means you've lost, and now you need to solve it, with your own mind through these exercises. What are your thoughts on the interplay between those two?
So I think it's different for everybody. I'm obviously, I'm not a fan of like polypharmacy, having to give people multiple medications, but sometimes it's necessary. Like depending on somebody's condition, they may have to take 5, 6, 7 different medications. If it's a very complex, case, and then they might need that along with therapy and, things like that. But I think the conversation has to shift from, because I need meds, I'm worse off, or, this person's better than me. It's different. It's like a game plan. Like I look at every patient's case like a game plan. I'm a big sports fan, so I look at it as a game plan, right? So if you have two people, we can have two people from the same family, but one person struggles with this and one person has this. Based on how this person is doing, and they may have better coping skills, they might just need to go to therapy once a week. The other person might, really struggle more, and because they might have the same genetics, but that person might need, an extra antidepressant along with therapy, and it doesn't make that person any less than. They just need that, So for people like us who are, we're working and like we're able to take care of ourselves, I always think that you should give the patient, listen to them. If they don't want to start meds and they don't have like thoughts of hurting themselves or hurting other people, listen to them, like maybe start with therapy. Like it should be a collaborative process. Like the patient is the quarterback of their own life. So they decide. Now there's situations where obviously somebody is sent to the hospital involuntarily, and let's say like they're having a manic episode with severe psychotic features. They really can't tell what's real or what's not. In those situations, a lot of times you do have to force neuroleptic medications on people, and then they have to take meds. So certain people, I feel like, will have to take meds. I don't like saying for the rest of your life. I like saying for an extended period of time, and then maybe like after a while you can try and see if you can come off of it. But some people just do so much better with their meds, and without their meds, they're unstable, and if, let's say it's a manic episode, those can be life-threatening if you're driving your car like 100 miles per hour in a 30, to 40 miles per hour zone. So I think it depends on the person. So certain people they just have to be on meds, like from what I've seen. But then I've worked with a quite intense population, so that's my background. But there's also people who, may need very little medications or maybe no meds, or just therapy. So I think it's based on the person. And once we can get to the point where we don't see the meds as the bad guy, I think that's where we should be headed to. Because some people, will fix their diet, and exercise, and they're good, and that's fine. But you can't really tell that to everybody, because somebody might say, all right, I'm done with my meds, I'm stopping, I'm just going to fix my diet and exercise. And they may do well for a while, but they might approach a situation where they're in a crisis and they're like, oh, wow, I did need my meds. So I think it's individualized for each person.
Yeah, I think we often lose perspective. I think we lose perspective really fast on how much variety there is in the world and in the human experience and the human personality, where we have so many of these common struggles, but so much variety within them that it's just mind-boggling. This idea that, everybody's unique is what one part of it has, gotten overblown, where sometimes everybody's, chasing off in a random direction when they really should just try to do something fairly normal and, see if that works. But on the other hand, it's like, yes, there is uniqueness in everyone, in the sense that there is infinite variety, and we really do need, I think, different solutions along the way. Real quick, let's go over what are some of your favorite mental health hacks?
Yeah, I have a couple of sayings I like to say. One is other people's opinions of you are none of your business. I love that because a lot of times you let one or two people's opinions stop you from a potentially great thing. And the pandemic is hopefully hopefully we're towards the end of it. And as people are getting back out there and being in public again, people are asking me things about how to make friends. And I think making friends in the post-COVID world, I think we should all be focused on showing our personalities to people and doing less of convincing. I think that's a key mental health tip. Like, don't convince people to like you, whether it's in a friendship or in a relationship. There should be no convincing. You should be showing people who you are, and then it's up to them to take it or leave it. And of course, like, we're all working on ourselves. So if you have certain things you need to work on, work on that. Don't just say I'm not going to change, but you should be showing people who you are. We're all on our own healing journeys, but show people who you are, and it's up to them whether they want to accept you as a friend or accept you as a romantic partner. So I would say other people's opinions of you are none of your business. And also, when you go back out there into society, show who you are. Like, we all have different things, our idiosyncrasies or whatever makes us different, but I believe we're more alike than similar. So as long as you're not convincing people to like you, it can, boost your self-esteem, save you a lot of pain and heartache. Because we all want to be liked, but you won't be liked by everybody. So when you find people you can be yourself around, you can be authentic, and there's no convincing, that level of acceptance is like, that's why we love TikTok, right? Because you go on there as yourself. Like, we were having the problem with Instagram where you go on there and like you can't get any traction. It's kind of changing now with the reels, but like on TikTok, you would go on there as yourself, right? People were going on there just as who they were. You didn't have to, dress it up any kind of way. And you're being accepted by potentially millions of people. That's a good feeling. Like, you're just presenting yourself as who you are and people are accepting it. That's the ultimate acceptance. And it's good for your mental health. It's great for your self-esteem when you're accepted the exact way you are without having to alter yourself. So I would say that's a key tip as we're, getting back out there in society. Just be yourself and don't try to convince people to like you.
Wonderful. So you've been getting a lot done. I've got one other. Do you have a favorite productivity hack?
So I actually do. Out here I have tons of sticky notes that I use personally. And what I do, because I realize that I want to do so much, and when it comes to content creation, like, I feel like a student. Like, I'm learning from so many people, and being out here in LA, like, the best thing about it is that, like, it doesn't matter how much education you have. We're all on like level 1, and like, once somebody's showing you the art, it's time for me to just shut up and listen because they have something beautiful that they're putting out to the world, and I'm just learning. So there's so much that I want to do between podcasts and TikTok and YouTube, and what I've realized is that I never get everything done in a single day. So what I do is, obviously, I have things that I know I'll accomplish every day, like walking my dog or making breakfast, and that lifts my self-esteem because I feel like I'm being productive. But every day, I don't know if this is a rule, but I always have 2 things that I know I need to do. Like, and if it's a day where it's a weekend and I'm being intentionally unproductive, I find like 2 things to do that I can accomplish to keep me going, to give me momentum, especially on Sundays. I might take like Saturday off from this role, but on Sundays, what are 2 things that I can do? Maybe clean the bathtub, or maybe like check out a new restaurant in the area. Because when you're in the process of doing things, it makes you feel good. So like on my to-do list, I have a long list of things to do. I will not get all of this stuff done, but I'll pick 2 things. Of course, if something's like urgent and a priority, then I have to do it. But I'll pick 2 things that are priority. I have to do those 2 things. And after that, I can shut it down for, the rest of the day. And I don't work long hours anymore. I more so work when the inspiration is there. So allow myself to, not force. When you force things, it never works. I try and force something because I'm like, oh, I have to post. It just won't come out the way I want it to be. So I'll pick 2 things every day that I know I can do, and then execute on those. And then after that, a lot of times when I do that, I'll do those 2 things and I'll do like 5 other things because I feel like, oh, I have momentum. I feel good about myself. But on the days when I can't get anything done, like, I could be unproductive for 2 days, and then I could start to feel bad about myself. Like as good as I'm doing, like it switches that fast. So like it's really good to always give yourself a pat on the back, figure out what can you do, and then you won't do everything in a day, but if you can do like 2 things right every day, it's gonna make you feel good and you'll feel productive. And before you know it, things will start to take off for you. So I like to keep it simple and not overwhelm yourself, because as you know, with content creation and social media, this world is so expansive. Like I'm sure you want to do a lot more than you're doing, and we all want to, but then like we can't double ourselves. If we could, that'd be great, right?
Applying some discipline to like a small number of things and then creating the space that allows for the creativity, I think it's a really valuable balance to strike for anybody in a creative field, especially is like you can't like, you can't oppress yourself into great art. You can't like constantly apply a whole bunch of discipline always to get there. But it's like if you live without discipline at all, it's a disaster, because yeah, like you said, you start to feel worse about the situation, and it gets kind of chaotic. So I really like that balance. That's great.
I think I've heard you talk about discipline too before on your TikTok page, and I love it because everybody's looking for like motivation. I need to put on some David Goggins to feel this way, which is great because I love David Goggins. I love Tony Robbins, or whatever can get me up. But when that motivation goes, like you no longer have the energy to create. So discipline, like I love the discipline tips on TikTok that you make.
Thank you. That's awesome. And yes, LA, I'm fascinated to take a trip there sometime.
Gotta let me know when you come out. Let me know.
I will. But yeah, I've found myself like, just amazed at like how many people I meet online that are, where are you from? LA. Because it's the place where online people are.
You're in Austin? Yeah. Well, then Austin is like the sister city. People are leaving LA to go to Austin. So
absolutely. And Miami is catching up real quick.
Right. Miami's one of the cities too.
Yeah. But yeah, it's still, LA is a fascinating place. I would love to visit, to, explore, like you said, just like to talk to the people in these creative fields. They're just doing so much. What are you working on currently? What are you excited about?
Now I'm excited. I'm working on a podcast. It's going to be called What's Good with Dr. Kojo. And I want to bring on, TikTokers who, have been doing it for a while, like TikTokers with large platforms like yourself and other celebrities in this space. And also just like celebrities in general, like certain celebrities, like Rosie O'Donnell followed me on TikTok. So whoever I can reach out to, different singers or whatever, bring them on the podcast and talk about mental health and wellness and life. And I want it to be like how we're talking now, like it's a relatable conversation. I want to talk about mental health and dating, mental health and friendships, how to deal with aging parents, how to deal with friends, how to deal with, life in the pandemic, post-pandemic, how to deal with the balance between being ambitious and, being mindful. So there's so much in this space I want to get into in the podcast. So, the things I talk about on my TikTok, we'll be talking about those things: ADHD, eating disorders, like body dysmorphia, if you're having issues with your body and going out in public, all that stuff. I want to get into that on the podcast and do it in long form video content. And I'm excited, to bring on like recognizable faces and talk about these issues, because it's going to make people feel less alone. Like if they see like this is their favorite singer and this is how they feel about a certain thing, or did they struggle with a certain thing, then you're like, oh, I don't feel like I'm as alone. Like I know this person was going through it, because when you see somebody who's doing well online, you assume that they have it all together. So I'm working on that podcast, and first episode should be, if not the last week of July, should be early August. I'm working with the team to get that out. And I'm just posting on, TikTok and Instagram, of course, and also making some, way to get into the YouTube space and do that a little bit better. But yeah, staying busy out here. But the podcast is the main new project that I'm consumed with at the moment.
Same. So everybody, when that comes out, please check it out. And can you just spell out your main social handles? And is there anywhere else you'd like to send folks?
Yeah, so obviously TikTok would be my main social media platforms. So that's at dr dot, it has a dot in here. Instagram doesn't have a dot, but at dr.kojos as in Sam, AR, F as in Frank, O. So at Dr. Sarfo, and on Instagram is the same thing without the dot. So just at Dr. Sarfo. But even on both social media platforms, there's like a not link tree, but Beacons link now. That's what we use. Beacons link, which you can click and you can keep up with all the things that I'm doing. So that's probably the best way to keep up with me, either on Instagram or TikTok, and click the Beacons link to get the full rundown on what I'm up to.
Well, this conversation has been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that. Thank you.